And joining me now is the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. Secretary Buttigieg, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks for having me back.
I want to start, obviously, with this issue of the supply chain. You're Secretary of Transportation, the ports, all of this is under your purview here. The big news you made was trying to establish a 24/7 operation now at as many of our nation's ports as possible. Well, let me ask you, this supply chain issue has been a problem for months. Why wait till this week to try that? Why weren't we at a 24/7 operation 9 months ago, 10 months ago, a year ago?
Well, I can't speak to a year ago before this administration was in office, but what I can tell you is that as soon as the president came in, he issued an executive order to, I think in February, to look at the supply chain from all angles. Now, one of the things that we started looking into earlier this year was these expanded operations. If you think about the scale and the complexity of these ports, obviously it's not something that you can do overnight. But after bringing together the players, agreeing that this was a good approach, seeing the pilot launched in Long Beach, and now being able to announce, as the president did last week, that LA is also going 24/7, we've got major progress on that front. Now, that's just one piece of a very complex puzzle, where you got the terminals, the rail piece, you got the warehouses, the drivers, and we're working on all of those angles. But let's remember, these are private sector systems. This is a capitalist country. Nobody wants the federal government to own or operate the stores, the warehouses, the trucks, or the ships or the ports. Our role is to try to make sure we're supporting those businesses and those workers who do.
Well, let me ask you about various ideas that industry leaders are going to be asking the federal government for. I'm going to put up 4 ideas that we have found in our research. There's some that would like to see deploying of the National Guard, maybe even use of the U.S. Navy at the ports themselves. A suspension of some of the tariffs that right now have added to the cost of shipping. Fill some of these vacant jobs using some temporary visas with labor from overseas, and possibly even tap some national defense funding. So let's unpack this. The National Guard. The state of Massachusetts is using the National Guard to fill a gap of school bus drivers, right? Is there any reason why you wouldn't use the National Guard to try to get more truck drivers on the road?
Well, right now we're focused on some other steps that we think are making a difference, including my department working with the state DMVs to cut some of the red tape for issuing commercial driver's licenses. Look, we're constantly going to reevaluate all of our options, but the steps we're taking right now are going to make a difference. And let's also acknowledge we have some more profound issues in our economy. Look at truck driving. If you look at the large employers of truck drivers, the annual rate of turnover is 90%. That tells us that there's something deeper going on than any short-term fix is going to address. Truck drivers want to be paid. They want to be respected. The Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, and I have been speaking out about this from earlier this year. And if we're not dealing with these deeper issues in our economy, just like we've got to deal with deep issues in our infrastructure, then these shorter-term measures are really not going to be enough. That's why we have things like the infrastructure bill, like the Build Back Better plan, that are really going to set up America for success in the long term.
I understand that, but we've got a short-term problem here. Just like, look, we've got most of our ports are out of date technologically, right? So, it'd be great to sort of build some new ports and have some, but some of these things take time. What you're describing takes time. It doesn't mean there's going to be gifts on the shelves to buy for Christmas this December. It sounds like what you're saying, setting up the country for is, do you agree, do you concur that this is going to get worse before it gets better?
Well, what I can tell you is that, we're doing everything we can for the short term and the long term. And there are some X factors out there on everything from, pandemic-related closures of factories and ports in Asia to things that are going on through the chain on the U.S. side. Now, of course, the other thing we got to talk about is that this isn't just a matter of supply. This is a matter of supply and demand. Every item you see, every container on every ship that is waiting at anchor in the ports of LA and Long Beach or anywhere else is there because an American company or consumer purchased it. And that's because demand has surged. Retail sales are off the charts. Remember, these ports are already bringing through record amounts of goods this year. And that's a sign, of course, of the successful work that's been done to bring the economy out of the teeth of the recession that we were facing earlier. So we've got that issue of demand that's mismatched with supply. And now we've got to make sure that the supply chains in the short term and the long run are positioned to catch up. Now, a lot of this should be resolved by markets, but we're not waiting for the markets to take care of it.
Right. One other thing that the government can do is tariff relief. Is it on the table?
Again, I think that any opportunity to make a difference will be looked at. But let's also remember that the president's overall policy of Buy America, his constantly pushing for us to make and source more goods in America, would be a big part of the solution on a lot of these issues. All right, if we didn't need to go overseas for so many of our products, we would have a lot more resilience in our supply chain when there is, anything from a typhoon to a COVID outbreak, shutting down a factory overseas. And so it's one more reason why the president is rightly calling on America and working for America to build up more of that domestic manufacturing and other supply capacity.
One of your tasks these days is also trying to sell the president's agenda, particularly what you've referred to it a few times on Build Back Better. There seems to be some news over the weekend that some of the biggest, perhaps the most important climate provisions in the bill have been struck down because of some negotiations with Senator Manchin. Are you concerned that the lack of an aggressive action on climate that it looks like this bill no longer will have in order to get 50 votes is going to end up costing you progressive support? I mean, is what it takes to get Manchin on climate, is it going to lose progressives on climate?
Look, the president is committed to major climate action. He has been from day one. You saw that in everything from rejoining Paris to the achievements of the climate summit to the preparations for the talks that are going to take place next month in Glasgow. And this is important, not just morally, but also economically, something I think we need to recognize, that like any maintenance issue, and this is basically a maintenance issue for the planet, the longer you take to deal with it, the more there will be costs in livelihoods and in dollars and, of course, in lives. So this remains a core commitment of this administration. And, of course, my slice of it as transportation secretary is one that we're working very hard on to prepare America for a future with more electric vehicles and to decarbonize other sectors of transportation, which amounts to the biggest part of our economy when it comes to emissions right now.
Are we going to hold up the bipartisan infrastructure bill any longer than October 31st if there's no deal on the larger agenda?
Look, I'm not going to predict legislative mechanics. What I will say is that we've got to get this done. And we've got to get this done for the American people and the American economy. Look, the Build Back Better vision and the infrastructure bill are supported by a majority of Americans. They're going to make lives better concretely in this country. They're going to strengthen the economy. And one underappreciated aspect of the president's agenda is that it will also lower the inflationary pressures that we're experiencing in this economy by making it easier for people to thrive and do well in the workforce, and by, of course, improving our infrastructure that is so important to the supply chains that we've been talking about this morning.
I know you've been under some bizarre attack for taking paid leave by some loudmouths in our political system. But I want to ask you about paid family leave in general, because it apparently may not be in the final part of Build Back Better. You took it. The federal government offers it to federal government employees. What does it say if the president can't get paid family leave into his agenda?
Well, it's on the president's agenda. It's in the Build Back Better plan, and I'm proud to work for an administration
but it may not
walks the walk on family values.
It may not last in the plan.
Let me tell you, it is in the president's vision, and we'll see what the legislative process is going to bring. But the president's been very clear on what he's calling for, and the American people want this too. And frankly, I view this as something, or I wish at least that this were something the Republicans could join Democrats in calling for. Look, paid family leave is important. It's important as a matter of family values. It's important to our economy. And one more thing that I think is maybe underappreciated. When somebody welcomes a new child into their family and goes on leave to take care of that child, that's not a vacation. It's work. It's joyful, wonderful, fulfilling work. But it is work, and it's time that our nation join pretty much every other country in the world and recognize that.
Secretary Buttigieg, appreciate you coming on this morning and sharing the administration's view.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.